Let's go back to our main.dart because this is where my app, this is where everything starts, right? Our main widget, my app is instantiated here. This is what we've written a little while ago. So to check out if the user is logged in, and if so, we go to main screen. If not, we go to login page. Now this kind of works okay, and that's fine. So we're going to use provider so that we can have that state of the user we can use anywhere else in our app. To do so, what we're going to do, I'm going to comment all of this out first of all for now. And then here I am going to wrap it around another widget. What widget I'm going to wrap it around? I'm going to wrap it around a multi-provider widget. The multi-provider widget will allow us to add more than one provider. Okay. Now, here's the thing. In order for us to use a provider, I'm going to Control Z everything real quick here. In order for us to use a provider, we need to get provider. So okay, I'm going to say Command Shift P or Control Shift P on Windows, and then I'm going to go to pubs assist like that. If you don't see it right away, you can just start typing pub like this. You can see, enter. Now I'm going to just type provider because we need to add that dependency. Okay, there we have it. So first of all, I'm going to just go ahead and stop and rerun all of this just to make sure we don't run into issues. We should do that every time we add a new dependency. Now that we have the provider added to our YAML, I'm going to go back to P here and say YAML, and we should have the provider there added as a dependency. So we are going to wrap this material app here with another widget called multi-provider as such. The multi-provider then says here the parameter provider is required because we will be passing more than one provider at a later time. So that means then I can say providers as such, and then here I can pass the providers that we want to add. Now, the first provider we're going to add is the user provider because this is what we're doing here. We are creating the Firebase auth, get instance and get current user, which we get that current user we've been using so far. But what we're going to do, actually, we're going to do something better. Inside of here, I'm going to pass a stream provider that will allow us to, number one, get that user, Firebase auth user, and also make sure to listen to the changes of the Firebase auth user. Meaning, if the user changes or is logged out or something happens, this will send out a notification to the entire tree of other widgets to say, hey, the user changed, here is what's happening, you decide what to do. So again, that's the idea. So we have the data which will be attached to a state. In this case, if the state changes, then we can pass in the information, notify everybody to say, hey, something changed, the user changed, the user was logged out, then do whatever you need to do with that information notification that I'm giving to you. That is essentially the setup that we're putting together here. So I'm going to say stream provider, and then I'm going to pass the type of data I am creating this provider for. In this case, it's going to be user as such. Now remember, this is not our user. This is not M user. This is actually Firebase auth users. Essentially, we're redoing what we had done before here. And once we have that, let's put our parentheses. First one is the create field. Now, this create field requires us to pass what exactly is that we want to create this provider to hold for other widgets to be able to retrieve if need be. First of all, it's a builder in a sense. That means we can pass here information. That means then we have the option to pass an arrow function or a full block function. Let's go with an arrow function. What is that we want to do when we want to create this stream provider that will hold a user object, a Firebase auth user object? Well, we're going to say Firebase auth instance. We're going to use, instead of the current user as we did before here, we're actually going to use another function that is called auth state changes. What this does, the auth state changes, again, if you hover over, notifies, let's see, it says here, notifies about changes to the user sign in state, such as sign in or sign out. This is exactly what I said before. And all comes up as a stream. We've seen that with stream builders and so forth. Okay? That's how we set up our stream provider. Our provider here, but a stream provider, not just a provider. Same idea behind, but we're using stream provider. Okay, now if you hover over it, looks like we have something else. Something else says the parameter initial data is required. That means when we create this provider, we need to pass another parameter, which is the initial data. So I can say here init initial data. For now, I'm just going to pass null. Say there's nothing initial that we need to pass there. Now, how do we retrieve this value here, right, of this user if we want to check if the user is logged in or not? So let's go to our main screen. This is where we would want to use that user. See if the user is logged in. In fact, if I say Command F, I'm going to go find Firebase auth. There it is. We have this Firebase auth here, which we've been using, right, which is fine. Now that we have set up in our main here, we have a stream builder, we have a stream provider, which will hold that state and data of our user, logged in user. Okay, this is Firebase user. How do we retrieve that information then? Well, look how great this is. Going inside of our build method, I can come up here and say something like this. I can say var user is equal to, then I say provider, right? The syntax is a little bit strange, but you've seen this before. I can say provider is going to have some issues because we need to actually import that. Okay, there we go. So provider dot, I'm going to use the of and pass the context like this. But now I need to also tell that what is the type that I'm expecting to get. So right after the of, before the parentheses, put angular brackets like this, and I'm going to say user, just to say this is the type we're expecting to receive from this provider. So what happens in the background, when this is ran, it's going to check which providers do we have in this tree. It's going to say, oh, we have this stream provider, which is going to pull in a user type, which is a Firebase auth. And we're going to go ahead and check the state, and we're going to go ahead and listen for the state changes of this user, whether he's or she's logged in or not. So we have that user, right? Now we can use it anywhere we want. Now to get that user anywhere we want, in this case, in any of these pages, now we all have to say something like this: provider.of, pass in the user and context, and we're done. Now we can use this user. In fact, if I come here and I say user dot, look at this, it is indeed a user object. We can get display name, email, and we can even go ahead and get UI ID, which is exactly what we want, right? So if we go and find again our Firebase, this guy here, where we use the Firebase.instance.current user.id, we no longer need to use this. Now we can just say user.UI ID like this, and we're done, right? So anywhere else, let's go ahead and find Firebase where we've done that. This place as well, we can just change this to say user.UI ID as well as this place. So anywhere else now we can actually do this. The important thing is that we are now using a provider to just pass along that data that we want. All we had to do is create this provider here inside of multi-providers. I said multi-providers because we could potentially add more than one provider. Looks like we're having some issues here. Let me go back and see. Instead of user, because we do have another user we're using, so let's change this name to something else. I'm going to change this to, auth user. That way I can just use that. I think that will probably help our case. Okay, because some places we do have that user that we're using, which is not going to help like this. Let's see. Let's go ahead, instead of saying widget here, because we're putting inside of this if statement there, instead let's just say login first, login page like this, and that way we are forced to go to login page the first thing, so that we actually know that we have a user. Okay, let's go ahead and say johnme.com. So we're having this issue here as an invalid member of null UI ID. Hello, this is Paul from the future. So I just want to let you know, if you're having this issue where you're seeing these errors, most likely is because you need to change the version of the Firestore SDKs. That is something that is known. It's a huge bug. So 7.20.0, that is the version you need to change to, okay, for this to work. All things considered, of course. If you are not having these issues, then you're okay with the version that you may have. All right, I talk about this at a little video, but I'm just coming back from the future and let you know now. All right, let's check out to see, go to terminal, console, go back to main here. At the top where we have our var auth, I'm going to say print auth user, just to see if we see anything. Save. Okay, let's check this out. All right, and there we have it, it's working. So what you need to do is just stop and rerun the whole app, and then we should have no problem. And let's go to terminal. We should see hopefully that the user is no longer null. Okay, this is just testing. You can see first goes into null, but then it gets the information. It just takes a little bit of time to get the actual user there. Okay, and you can see if you hover over closely, it says provider. That means we are getting this user from our provider, which makes sense because that's exactly what we're doing here, right? We're getting from provider of user, passing the context, and we're getting that information. All right. Obviously, going to come back and work more in our main.dart because this logic is not what we are looking for at this point. We will change the whole navigation to use routes at a later time. That way we can have a specified route for pages or links where users can go and get to different pages.